When the fall begins, depending on where you live, gardening may not be top of mind, but there are plenty of activities you can do this time of year, from cleaning up your garden to sharpening your tools, even planting shrubs and bushes in some climates so they gain their footing before the frost. We're talking fall garden tips today on Still Time for Joy, covering both the practical and the pleasurable sides of growing more beauty in your life. Hello, I'm Sandra Levine, host of Still Time for Joy. My late mother, Dorothy, was a devoted Ocean County Master Gardener in Toms River, New Jersey, and in her memory, I'm spreading the word about the joyful benefits of gardening. Susan Emhardt-Servidio is senior horticulturalist and the coordinator of the Ocean County Rutgers Master Gardener program. You can find Master Gardener programs in all 50 states.
Master Gardener program is basically training volunteers from our community to then help spread educational information about gardening tips and ways to make your life better in the garden, or inside, outside, anything to do with plants. We're basically educational based. Our Fall Garden Days is a culmination of our Rutgers Master Gardener intern class this year. They are promising Master Gardeners, and they are taking what they learned in class and to give people some helpful tips for the fall and then get into planting. Fall is a great time to plant and find great deals for native plants and other perennial plants that you can plant in the fall that will overwinter and to be ready to go in the spring to just flourish in the spring. So a lot of tool care, swapping out invasives for natives, how to start a cut flower garden. So there's a lot of different helpful tips, and we also have our Ask a Master Gardener program as well here, so that if you have home questions that you can ask directly and get some answers.
So let's go table by table because there's absolutely so much to learn here. It's amazing.
The first one is about swapping invasive plants out and putting in native plants so that it can help our ecosystem that is normally here, and getting rid of plants that are taking over that are non-native or exotic in our area. So taking out, let's say, burning bush. It's a great, it's a euonymus, it's a beautiful fall color in the fall, but it reseeds. They have little berries, the birds eat it, and it reseeds everywhere, and they're taking over our native forests. So you could plant a sweet shrub, clethra, alternifolia, which is a hummingbird sweet. It's real fragrant, flowers in the summer, and you have that nice fragrance in the summer, and then it has a beautiful yellowish fall color. Sometimes they do have some nice oranges too. And that would be a great plant, and it gets nice, and it's a great habitat for birds and pollinators.
What are some examples of some invasive species that people typically grow, that maybe not knowing that it's a problem?
Our two biggest ones are the burning bush, which is euonymus, also barberry. So Japanese barberry, there's a green versions and there is a bronze version. A lot of people like it for the foliage, and it reseeds, the birds eat it. So you may not see it reseeding in your yard, but it will be reseeding in our native habitats. And it's competing with our natives for their space.
What about bamboo?
Bamboo is not native, and the big thing is with bamboo is that there are some clumping forms that are okay for the garden, but most of them that people have planted in the past have been the running forms, and it's really hard to get rid of. So sometimes, making sure you know what that plant's supposed to do in normal or even abnormal conditions, because sometimes you provide enough water, it'll go and get a little crazy in the garden. So not planting bamboo, possibly choosing some other American arborvitae. If you don't have a deer issue, deer are a problem here in Ocean County, so it is a little hard sometimes to find something that's not going to be eaten horribly by the deer. So the big problem is with our ecosystems changing, we are disturbing so much of our natural lands that our native species are struggling to survive. And with bringing in new homes and bringing in exotics that don't normally survive here, or not in this kind of conditions, you put a strain on what the birds and the bees that do live here and depend on some of our natives for their food supply. Also oak trees. Our native oaks are wonderful, and they host so many species of insects. A lot of the caterpillars then feed the birds, so that circle of life comes back around. So offering, when you can, a native solution or substitution for something that might be invasive. So doing homework, And definitely Jersey Friendly Yards is a great website to check and look up what's invasive and what isn't. We also are teaching people about composting, whether you're composting outdoors and how to do a compost pile, and then also vermicomposting, so you get to play and touch some worms if you want to kind of get in the dirt, soil. And you can do vermicomposting indoors during the wintertime, and the worms don't escape unless they're unhappy. So proper taking care of the worms and just feeding them. Newspaper and your refuse that you use in the house, toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls. There's so many things that you could put in an indoor composting pile. You could put those things in there and the worms will help break those down. And the special worms that you use for vermicomposting are not native. Most of our worms are not native, but those worms are not native, so you don't want to put those in the garden in the summertime. They are for indoor only. They can only survive within it warm.
So people who would love to try composting, what can I put into my compost?
Composting, the big thing is knowing that you need greens and browns. So your greens are your living material, things that were alive and still wet, still fresh, versus something that's dried up, like dried leaves. Now, brown material would be papers, wood products, things that are dead, and then you would mix that with a balance of wet products, so your kitchen scraps, things that are not meat or dairy based, no fish. You want to have things like your tomatoes that are old, or cherries or fruits and things like that. Do eggshells. You want to crush them up. The more surface space, the easier it breaks down. Banana peels, fruit peels, onions. You can do any of your cooking scraps as long as it's not meat or dairy based. Keep anything that has sauce. You don't really want anything with butter. Those things, you want to try to keep that out as most as possible so that you don't get a rancid smell going on in the garden. And then you will have compost for your house plants, or outside, you turn that compost over and the compost would then be ready for the next spring.
And what is the benefit of making compost?
Well, one, you're recycling something and keeping it out of our landfills, and also being able to give it back to the earth. So once those materials break down and become this nice compost, it's a great growing medium to help boost your soil after growing vegetables and things each year.
And that can really make a difference.
It can. It just gives them more organic matter, which helps the plants somewhat nutritiously, but more gives them more newer carbon and water and different supplies that they can need, and it makes it more available for them.
What else should gardeners try to do in the fall?
We have a table also doing a garden spa, which would be taking care of your tools, showing your tools a little bit of love and tender care, cleaning them, sharpening them, getting them ready for next year's garden. Your pruners, making sure they're clean, disinfecting your tools from each year in case you have any fungal residues from your vegetable garden. When you're cleaning your tools, you can use a wire brush, you can use Brillo pads, anything to help scrape off some of the sap that may have been stuck on the plants from cutting pine and things like that. Keeping that honed edge on your pruner, it will keep the wounds that you're making now in these plants, because you are cutting them and you're making a wound, from getting any bacteria that doesn't need to be in there. So it is important to keeping those tools clean. You can also dip the tools with 1 part bleach to 10 parts water. The bleach can be a little corrosive to metal, so you can also use rubbing alcohol. We also have tips on pruning, what you should be doing in the fall if you do need to prune some of your plant material. Any dead wood, you can prune those out, clean your tools then again after that. A lot of plants don't need to be pruned unless you're trying to use them for a certain purpose. A hedgerow, maintaining the branch that's in the window. Yeah, cutting those things back, and proper pruning and what type of plant is needed to know so that you are pruning it at the correct time. Most plants can be pruned in the fall, but there are a lot of flowering plants like our azaleas and rhododendrons. If you prune it in the fall, you're cutting off your flower buds for the following year, so that can be a problem. So you want to know when to do these things. Also, a lot of people ask us about hydrangeas. Hydrangeas are the most asked about question, and when do I prune, how do I prune them, so we can help you with that. The other we do at the Spa Garden Day is also about soil testing. Why do you need a soil test? Soil tests are very important because if you don't know what's in your soil, how do you know what to put in it? How much do you put in it? How often do you do it? And knowing, is it right for the plants that I'm growing? So a soil test is really essential. If you haven't done it, you should. And you only have to do about once every 3 years.
And you're checking the pH.
pH, and here in the office we do test pH, just pH, and then we do have the soil test kits that you would send your sample up to Rutgers Labs for $20, and they will do a pH and a soil fertility, so you know how much fertilizer you have or the nutrients that are available to the plants. You may have a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium in your soil, but if you have too much fertilizer because you keep fertilizing your lawns or over-fertilizing, it goes into our waterways and becomes a big problem then in our bays for our wildlife, for our shellfish. So, we do a lot here in Ocean County to remedy that. From there, we also have some materials that will show you how to properly harvest seed and store that. Or the other thing is this time of the year, you can take some cuttings of plants, but most of the time our cuttings of propagation, stem cuttings, can be done in the spring or in the summer. We also have a table on rain gardens and how to start a rain garden. Rain gardens can be a bit involved because it does need a little bit of architectural landscaping done underneath, but at least what's the principle? Rain gardening is one way to capture stormwater, rainwater. In the homeowner be rainwater, in the streets and municipalities it would be stormwater. Some way to capture it so it can get a chance to release back in the ground before it goes to the streets and down into our waterways. So we have that table, and then we do have a cutting gardens, a whole table. The ladies there are just wonderful. They have outdone themselves this year. They have a cutting garden brochure on how to cut flowers. When you're cutting flowers, how do you prepare them, and then what's some of the great tips for arranging them. And all the plants that they have that they are giving out today were from Master Gardener Gardens, as well as our cut flower garden at our Master Gardener facilities at Ocean County Park, and just wonderful way of sharing some beauty with everybody that comes today. We also have a homegrown garden that our interns and master gardeners maintain in the back of our building. It's small, but we wanted to give a way to educate public on how you can grow vegetables mostly in your garden and that you can produce. So they had produced this season 100 pounds of produce that was donated to local pantries, and it continues to grow. I think at the heart of all this, our reconnecting with nature really is just finding ourselves, knowing that we can be sustainable, we can change. Maybe we need to get back to nature so that we're able to be more self-sufficient and also find a way to relax in our busy lives, trying to make a difference in our life as well as those around us. I think gardening touches a place in all of us, whether it's something we remember from our parents or grandparents, something we did for joy, for fun, having a bountiful harvest, having family together time, having time for ourselves to regroup, and also providing a sense of stability in our lives that we could do this. I did this, I grew this, and give something to someone else to help someone else, whether it's food, whether it's a plant, something to brighten their life. I think gardening just brings it all back together for families. It's thinking outside ourselves. What's the bigger picture here? We're trying to save our world for our future generations. Today, this day is beautiful with just bringing like-minded people together. I always find a friend in the garden. So anybody that wants to talk plants, insects, bugs, anybody that can find a way to connect with somebody can find it usually in a garden or something in the soil. Just getting your hands dirty, getting back to nature. You can do this. Just try it because you'll get the bug.
Susan Emhardt-Servidio, thank you so much for sharing all this information with us about what you can do in the fall with your garden.
Thank you, Sandy, for coming and visiting and showcasing our events. It is just wonderful to have you here as well. Thank you.
If you found today's show helpful, please share the information with someone who needs it and follow Still Time for Joy for more practical tips on weathering life's storms, as well as inspiring stories of people who have turned their pain into purpose. Please consider supporting the work that goes into producing the show on Patreon. Follow Sandra Levine Productions on Facebook and YouTube, and learn more at sandralevine.com.